The fight over Puerto Rico's potential statehood is certainly intensifying as the region grapples with growing economic inequality. A new CBSN Originals documentary examines what's at stake. Here's a preview.
We're going through close to 16 years of an economic crisis in which different administrations have implemented austerity policies, in which working families in Puerto Rico, university students in Puerto Rico have been asked to carry a heavier part of the burden while receiving less and less essential services, while at the same time, that same government that's asking you to sacrifice more because we're in a crisis and we need you to sacrifice is telling these individuals, come to Puerto Rico, vacation in Puerto Rico, and in exchange for that, you don't pay taxes. And that's obviously hypocrisy that the people of Puerto Rico are no longer willing to tolerate.
Manuel Natal Albelo joins me now to talk more about all of this, and we just saw him featured in the Originals documentary. So thank you so much for joining us, Manuel. I did not say the name of your political party because I think I probably would have done a terrible job, but can you say the name, please, for us?
Movimiento Victoria Ciudadana, which roughly translates to the Citizens' Victory Movement, which is a progressive political party here in Puerto Rico.
All right, so I want to later on. I want to get into what the political party represents, but I want the viewers to know that your political party is one that is in favor of breaking what many see as a colonial sort of relationship between Puerto Rico and the U.S. So we'll get into that in a bit, but how would you describe Puerto Rico's current economy, and how much control does Puerto Rico have over its economic fate? A lot of people may not know, but there's an oversight board that was put in place to help Puerto Rico restructure its debt. How is that working out?
Well, Puerto Rico has been in an economic crisis since 2006. That has led to different government administrations to implement a series of austerity policies in order to supposedly alleviate the crisis. And the effect has been completely the opposite. The crisis has intensified. Unemployment has gone up in Puerto Rico. Inequality and poverty has gone up in Puerto Rico. The immigration of young professionals in Puerto Rico has incremented. Budget cuts to education, to all the areas in which you're supposed to invest in the middle of a crisis. Unfortunately, the austerity policies have moved the needle in the opposite direction. And that has created a perfect storm in Puerto Rico, in which we have an economic crisis.
Let's talk about the board.
Fiscal crisis, a social crisis. In 2016, Congress passed PROMESA, which is the Fiscal Oversight Board.
Hey, sorry, just to let the audience know that we lost your audio just for a little bit, but often when it comes to technology, if you just hang on in there, it'll pick back up, and we heard sort of the tail end of your answer. So let's talk about this oversight board. I know there's been a lot of criticism as to whether or not the decisions and choices are actually beneficial to Puerto Rico, or perhaps beneficial to outside investors. What you laid out is a plan that you say has made the economy worse in Puerto Rico. Who's benefiting from some of the decisions that the board is making?
Well, some of these hedge funds that have decided to buy Puerto Rico's debt on the secondary market, and they have made a bet that they're going to get paid back what they bought for 25 cents. They're going to get back the full dollar plus interest. And that means that the people of Puerto Rico are going to have to pay in their blood, sweat, and tears for their profits to be maintained. And the Fiscal Control Board is representing those economic interests that are not the best interests of the people of Puerto Rico.
So the political party that you represent, like I said, is in favor of sort of what many have used the word sort of a colonial relationship, the decolonization of Puerto Rico. But there are many ways to go about doing that. Statehood is one option. So I'm curious, is statehood sort of the only way, do you believe, or are there other options?
Well, traditional political parties in Puerto Rico have been primarily organized around the status question. You have a statehood party, you have an independence party, and you have a Commonwealth party. And unfortunately, that way of organizing politically in Puerto Rico has led not only to a failure to be able to put an end to our colonial relationship, but also a failure in terms of dealing with everyday problems that Puerto Ricans are facing. In Victoria Ciudadana, we propose that we come together and find a consensus on a process rather than imposing the results or predetermining the results. So in Victoria Ciudadana, we have people that believe in statehood, we have people that believe in independence, we have people that believe in some sort of free association relationship with the United States, but we have all come together under the process, under a self-determination process in which all options would have an equal opportunity to present their case to the people of Puerto Rico, and at the end of the day, the people of Puerto Rico would decide. So we believe in self-determination and a democratic response for the colonial relationship of Puerto Rico and the United States. It's for Puerto Ricans to be the ones to decide, not for Congress to impose a one-sided solution like they already did with Promesa. That's not the route that we should follow when it comes to Puerto Rico's status and putting an end to our 123-year colonial relationship with the United States.
Manuel, before I let you go, I have one more question, and I want to excuse sort of my ignorance because I feel like I should actually know the answer to this. But there have been a number of sort of non-binding referendums on statehood. Often in Puerto Rico, statehood often sort of ekes out a little bit of a majority. It's not overwhelming, but it's more than half. Why has Puerto Rico never moved to the next step beyond a non-binding resolution? Why does that happen?
Well, because if the process from its origins lacks legitimacy, regardless of the result, it's not going to get us out of the place that we're currently stuck at. And that's been the problem with the way we have faced this situation for many decades. From local political parties, they have been trying to legislate unilaterally and without the consensus of other political parties, one-sided referendums or plebiscites in which the process is predetermined and pre-designed in order to favor the option that's the option favored by the ruling party in Puerto Rico. So the result of that is that in some cases, statehood, for example, has got 97% of the vote. In other cases, less than 15% of the votes. In some cases, the Commonwealth has received the majority. But it's all determined previously by the way the non-binding plebiscite has been designed. And the United States Congress, they understand this, and they know that they're not going to act upon a one-sided solution to this problem. And that's why we're supporting a self-determination process like the one proposed by Congresswoman Nidia Velázquez and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, in which all non-colonial, non-territorial options can compete in in a status convention in Puerto Rico. And at the end of the day, the people of Puerto Rico would decide what's the future that they want in terms of the relationship between Puerto Rico and the United States.
Manuel Natal Albelo, thank you so much for spending time with us this morning.
Thank you. Good morning.
So be sure to download the CBS News app on your phone or any connected TV to watch Fighting for Paradise, Puerto Rico's Future, this Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern on CBSN.